Hello and welcome to Encore. You were just listening to a track called Untamed by bass guitarist and all-round jazz legend Marcus Miller. Marcus Miller, who's with us on set today. Thank you very much for joining us here at France 24. Now, you're in Paris at the tail end of a mammoth world tour following the release of your latest album, Laid Black. Untamed is just one of 9 tracks on this album. How have you found the tour so far? Any standout nights?
The tour so far has been great. Let's see, standout nights. Well, we played in Washington, D.C., which is a big town for us, and we had a great show. And the thing is, we've been doing it for so long, the audience comes and they go, "Do you have anything new for us? Come on now, we've seen you a few times, you know?" But we always manage to pull something new and get them going again. So we've had some good shows. We just finished a show, an East Coast run. We played Philadelphia and Newark, New Jersey, which is about 20 minutes outside of New York. And that was great because I had a lot of family come by and check out the show. So it's really cool.
Always nice to have family in the audience, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
So now, this latest album has been described as genre-defying. What were the musical influences behind your latest album?
Let's see. Well, you just heard a little bit. So there's like some hip-hop going on, there's some funk, some soul, of course, some jazz. You know, I'm from New York. So when I was coming up as a musician, you didn't really get to choose which genre you were going to play. You know what I mean? Everything was in New York is happening at the same time. So I'm just a product of that. So if you hear us play, if you hear my sound, it's always going to have a bunch of different influences. But it feels really natural to me.
Now, you've recruited a real motley crew of guest artists on this. We've got Trombone Shorty, we've got Take 6, Jonathan Butler, to name but a few. Just how important is collaboration for you?
It's everything, to be honest, you know, especially if you're playing music that has improvisation, because we work off of each other, you know, we vibe off of each other. So it's good to have people that you respect, people who can give you as much as you're giving them, you know, back and forth. And, you know, Trombone Shorty, Take 6, you know, Take 6 did they helped me do a version of a song that's a tribute to my dad, who recently passed. And, you know, we're such good friends that they really kind of got into the emotion of the song, you know, and it was a really incredible experience. So collaboration is everything.
Now, there's one cover on this album of yours that really stood out for me. That's your take on Que Sera Sera by Jay Livingston and Ray Evans, popularised, of course, by Doris Day and Alfred Hitchcock's The Man Who Knew Too Much. You worked with Belgian singer-songwriter Céla Sue on this one. Let's take a listen. Listen to that all day, and it really is a distinct departure from the original. What was it in this song that made you think, yeah, I can do something really different with this?
Well, like you said, Doris Day did it first for the Hitchcock movie. I think it was like 1961, something like that. Yeah. But then in 73, Sly and the Family Stone did it. Now, when we first heard it, the Doris Day version, it was very kind of poppy, almost like a children's song.
Yeah,
right?
Sweet, optimistic.
Sweet, very sweet. But when Sly did it, he put this grit and dirt and gospel feeling into it. And that's when I really, like, it blew my head off, you know. And I always listened to it, always, you know, referring to it. And one day my wife says, you know what, you need to do that song. And we had been collaborating with Céla Sue, who's incredible. We had been doing a few concerts where she was my special guest. And it always worked so well. And we thought maybe we could do this song. So we called her up and said, look, you're young, so you don't know this song, or you especially don't know the Sly and the Family Stone version. She says, I was just listening to that last week. I said, really? So the version that you heard us do is kind of like a combination of the old original and the Sly version, and then we added some of our own stuff in there too.
No, you can absolutely hear that. Now, you've described this album, Laid Black, as modern, and that's perhaps in contrast to your last album, which you've likened to a musical voyage through your history. Now, that one consists of a series of collaborations with musicians along the old African slave routes. Was that a conscious decision for these two albums to really provide something of a contrast to one another? Yeah,
well, you know, I was named the spokesperson by UNESCO, the spokesperson for the Slave Route Project. It's a project they have where they want to raise awareness of the story of slavery. They think it's really important, and I do too, especially among young people. They know slavery existed, but they don't really know the details these days. So, you know, they asked me if I would help just kind of communicate that, you know, you need to know this story. And so rather than just talk about it, for my last album, Aphrodisia, I thought maybe I should just incorporate the story into my music. So my idea was, as we were talking about before, collaborate with musicians from different stops along the slave route. So I was jamming with musicians from Mali, from Senegal, from Morocco, and then from South America, the Caribbean, the south of the U.S., just following the route of the slave ships, you know, but also following the musical influences because, you know, in doing this album, I started to hear the connection from the African music and the modern American music. Like, if you hear the blues and then you hear some music that comes out of Mali, back then you go, oh, wow, there's a similarity. Okay, so that was Aphrodisia.
Well, we can actually take a little listen to one of the tracks from Aphrodisia. We're going to have a listen to Highlife. Could you just introduce it for us?
Okay, so this is a song I collaborated with some musicians from Senegal. Alioune Wade is a good friend of mine. He plays bass and he sings. And we came up with this tune together, and it's called Highlife.
So can you tell us what inspired that particular song?
I came up with this groove that was reminiscent of the, you know, the Nigerian highlife music, you know. King Sunny Ade and Fela, these are musicians, African musicians who popularized this style in the 70s. So I came up with this groove and I played it for Alioune. He said, oh man, that's almost it. You need to add blah, blah, blah. You need to add this, add that. So we came up together, and then Sharif Soumano was playing percussion, you know, playing the harp, the kora, and he started singing, you know, along with it. And I said, don't forget that. Matter of fact, go on the mic and sing that in the words that you heard us singing. You know, I still don't know what it means. But actually, I do know what it means. But, you know, it means everybody come downtown and let's have a party. I didn't know what it meant at the time, but it sounded so good.
And you definitely get that impression from that track.
Absolutely.
Moving on to something a little darker, possibly. You've always been attuned to the darker periods of Black history. One song that often makes an appearance in your gigs is called Gorée, named after an island just off the coast of Dakar, Senegal, that formed essentially a holding post for West African slaves during the transatlantic slave trade. What does the island signify for you?
Well, Gorée, and I think there were numerous places like Gorée on the West African coast like that, but it's basically the beginning of our history as African Americans. This was where they took us to kind of take stock of who they had before they sent us to the, you know, to the Americas. So it's very significant, you know, and when we took the tour of Gorée, it was very emotional because the guy was telling us the stories about what life was really like in that holding place and also on the ship. So it was very emotional. And I wrote a song as soon as I got home about the feeling, you know.
Yeah. Over the years, you've collaborated with really some of the greats in jazz, soul, funk and R&B. It's extraordinary, really. Herbie Hancock, Eric Clapton, Aretha Franklin, Bill Withers, and of course, Miles Davis. After touring with a jazz legend in your early 20s, you went on to produce and arrange his groundbreaking album, Tutu. What was it like to work with Miles Davis?
Oh, of course, it was incredible. And it was a huge learning experience. And people always ask me, what did you learn from Miles? And it wasn't like he was talking and giving me lessons, you know what I mean? But just observing him was incredible. And the thing, you know, he was already a legend when I was working with him. He was the top, you know. And to realize after working with him that he was a human being, you know what I mean? He was just working on his emotions and using his talent to express himself. It really demystified, you know, these legends for me. You know, I met him when I was 21. And after meeting Miles, it made it easier for me to deal with Aretha Franklin or Shaka Khan or some of these other people who are incredible artists too, because I learned how to deal with them as human beings.
An extraordinary list of collaborations there. Marcus Miller, thank you so much for joining us here on Encore on France 24. That is, alas, all we have time for today. Thank you very much for watching. You can, of course, catch this show again, along with many others, on our website, france24.com. We're also, of course, on Instagram and Twitter. Just search for Encore F24. There is more news coming up. We're going to leave you, though, with a song we heard a bit of at the beginning of the show, Untamed by the marvellous Marcus Miller.